Welcome back everybody to BeamNG.drive, and today we're looking at the Satsuma 210, more specifically at the 1500 Sedan Deluxe. And yeah, this is a small subcompact Japanese saloon, and yeah, it was built between 1958 and 1959, and yeah, doesn't weigh all that much at 2,048 pounds and has 69 horsepower and 83 pounds-feet of torque from its 1500cc inline-4 engine. Don't have any 0 to 60 times, and certainly don't have any 0 to 100 times because its top speed is only 91. But yeah, it's an extremely basic car. Rear wheel drive, front engined, has typical 4 doors, typical bench seats for the time, and yeah, the engine looks like that. So yeah, not particularly massively inventive. And there's a boot filled with the spare wheel as usual for cars of this time. But yeah, I'm anticipating this to be tough because simple generally means that there's not much to go wrong, but obviously simple also means that there's not much in the way of technology either. There's no ABS, there's no limited slip diff in the rear, and yeah, the suspension is leaf springs as you can see. So yeah, let's first get around the grid map and see how much punishment it can take before it can no longer move, and yeah, then we'll get to the other side of the grid map where we'll yeah, put it through its paces with a flip ramp, explosive barrels, and a cinder block wall. So yeah, the main weaknesses for this are probably going to be the wheels and the driveline, because yeah, even though it's a small car, you still got a long driveline between the front and the rear, which is so typical of vehicles on this game. Plus, obviously, if the chassis starts getting warped, then the lack of a diff in the rear isn't going to help it put power down. Ooh, bit of a stunt there. Bumps time. See, the suspension is quite soft, so that might well play do it a load of good, because it means it's forgiving. But once it breaks, it's going to be a hassle to drive. Oh, does also mean that it bounces quite a lot. Does like to roll over, but generally it comes down back on its roof outside of this time. The bonnet is now in the driver's door for some reason. I don't expect the suspension at the rear to go though, because leaf springs are quite tough. That's the reason why they were used for so long, because they're tough and simple. Although I think the chassis is... oh, actually maybe the leaf springs have gone in the rear. I wasn't expecting that, to be honest. I was expecting them to be the ones to last, outside of the front ones especially. Oh, no ABS there. Making this not particularly safe car, but then again, what car was back in the late 50s? Oh, and there goes the rear drive shaft. So yeah, that's, like I said, going to be one of the main weaknesses of this car, especially with the suspension at the front going lower and lower. It's bound to catch the rear drive shaft. So yeah, let's get to the other side of the grid map and see how we deal with a flip ramp, explosive barrels, and a cinder block wall. I'm not expecting the explosive barrels to go well for this. Like I said, it is quite lightweight and really rather simple. Yeah, it doesn't have the best crash worthiness, judging by the how it performed there on the grid map. Engineering at least was quite weak. The crash protection for the passengers was reasonable, so it's hardly the worst that we've seen. Let's reload it so I don't have to keep reloading it all the way at the other end. Right, so I'm not expecting this to perform brilliantly here, because like a lot of classic cars, there's not much in the way of roof protection. There's very thin pillars, and the wheels may well be suspect. The soft suspension is going to help us continue to roll as well. But actually not all that much damage there. I was expecting more. But obviously with us doing it 3 times the flip ramp, obviously the damage is going to accumulate over time. But yeah, there's not that much damage actually. The roof didn't come down as much as I would have expected. And there's a bit of bodywork damage at the front. There's probably some wheel alignment damage as well. Yeah, it's pulling a little bit to the left, but not dramatically so. So we'll go from this side this time. Right. Lost a hubcap. It's not rolling as much as I would have expected, to be honest. It looked like the roof would have been a kind of shape for it to roll over quite a fair bit, but yeah. It's not growing as much as I expected. More bodywork damage again. We've lost a window that smashed completely, I think. But yeah, it's surviving reasonably well. The pull to the left has gotten a little bit worse though. So it's not an easy car to drive anymore. Let's see how it deals with this final go. Maybe this car is going to be tougher than I expected. Well, we've lost the door now. That's a bit of a safety failure there. Quite frankly, the roof has survived far better than I was expecting. The wheels haven't come off. And yeah, outside of the door, that's the only major visual damage. So yeah, massively impressed by the Satsuma there. Was expecting a lot worse. So let's see how it does with the barrels, because obviously these are far more destructive than the flip ramp is. Just backing it up to give it as much speed as possible. Because we're not the sprightliest of cars with, you know, only 69 horsepower. Well, it's quite damaging, definitely. We have flown through the air, we've killed the engine and the drive shaft, so the car isn't going to be driving anywhere, but all the driver and the passenger is going to be okay. That's the one important point. Ow. Well, lack of seatbelts wouldn't have helped in that landing, that's for sure. But the overall passenger cell has dealt with that reasonably well. Once again, the door has come off, but yeah, quite frankly, considering it's just gone up against 2 massively explosive barrels, I was expecting it to disintegrate, to be honest. But the passenger cell as a whole has survived reasonably well. Obviously, everything else hasn't. We've lost the engine, the drive shaft. Looks like one of the wheels have been, punctured, and the drive line doesn't look very straight anymore. But yeah, survived far better than expected. So let's see how it does against a cinder block wall. Obviously, destructive wise, this is only really going to impact the front end of the car, but that is obviously the more important crucial point. So let's see what it does. Oh, practically stopped dead there. Yeah, we dropped from like 70 miles an hour to like 26 in an instant, which is, yeah, would be very punishing for everyone inside, especially again because there's no seatbelts and no airbags. That would have been pretty deadly. And yeah, the roof has obviously moved a bit. The doors have, yeah, looking like they're on the verge of popping out. So yeah, not particularly safe with the cinder block wall there, but overall it's done far better than I was expecting. And I think on the whole, I'd say it's passed the grid map. So yeah, nonetheless, let's get to the crash haul and see how this does with 30, 40 and 60 mile an hour small overlap crash tests. Right, so many a car have reasonably done well here, although there have been some notable failures at really rather quite low speed. So yeah, I'm not particularly sure what to expect from this, considering its age and the fact it's not particularly heavy, and yeah, it's shown it's susceptible to some failure in terms of the doors and the front part of the roof. So yeah, this is going to be a hopefully an interesting experience here. Well, that's not the most encouraging of crashes, to be honest, given it's only 30 miles an hour and the door is already looking like it wants to come away. But on the whole, that's done okay. I'd have been satisfied with anyone in there surviving, to be honest. But yeah, it's not painting a rosy picture for 40 miles an hour, that's for sure. So yeah, let's see what it can do at that speed. So slow it right down just to be a bit more precise with the controls, because this car isn't the easiest of things to drive at slow speed. Well, surprisingly, there's not much more damage in terms of the passenger compartment than there was at 30 miles an hour. Yes, the door has moved a bit more, but outside of that, most of the damage has been sustained by the car itself and not, you know, the parts that are important. So yeah, definitely the front has taken most of the brunt of that, but the passenger compartment itself has dealt with that fine. But obviously 60 mile an hour is a whole different story, and it has been a lot for a lot of cars on this series. So yeah, let's see what happens. Actually, I'm going to reload to give it a more sprightly start. At least we can make 60 miles an hour, which is good. I don't think that was particularly on point like the previous two, I'm afraid, so we are going to try that again. I didn't slow down the car enough before we got to it to get precise in the steering. So we'll slow it down to 2 times. It's a problem with the crash haul. I would prefer if it sent the cars down itself like it does in real life, but unfortunately that's not the case. You have to drive the vehicle. Yeah, that's predictably bad, like I was expecting, to be honest. The roof has caved upwards, the door has moved to the halfway point of the rear door, which just shows how much the rest of the car has crumpled up. The chassis has also bent. The entire front car has bent rightwards, so yeah, that's quite clearly peeling away, which has also left the door on the passenger side, yeah, susceptible to being opened. Obviously, that's going to get people out, but if there was any more speed in this, that passenger door would have flung out on its own with the energy of crashing, so anyone on the inside would have moved. And yeah, it looks like the steering wheel has... I can't actually walk on with this mod, but yeah. As you can see, the camera is now where the seat should be so that just shows how much it's been forced backwards. The steering wheel is in the dashboard. The column shifter is, yeah, right where your legs would be. So yes, that's a failure. The 30 and 40 miles an hour ones were average, but yeah, that is definitely a failure. So yeah, nonetheless, let's get out onto the highway and see how this car deals with two similar sized vehicles and then one that really isn't. So for our first crash test on the highway, we're going to be going up against a Covert, which is basically the more modern version of this, as it only weighs about 50 pounds more than this, but obviously it is far newer. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what the two of them can do against one another. Because yeah, they are obviously way different in terms of age. Switch between the two because obviously they're not going to guarantee to be crashing into each other if I don't. To be honest, I was expecting worse from the Satsuma. Obviously it's not perfect, and at 60 miles an hour stopping on an instant, that would likely result in death, but the look of the car is at least reasonable. But again, you can see that the chassis and the bodywork has moved substantially backwards just by the doors. But yeah, on the whole, that's done well. Obviously the Covert is fine. There's no doubt that that was going to do well. Although, granted, the roof has moved and the door has bowed out a bit, but that would have seatbelts and airbags and whatever else, so yeah, you'd be confident about that. But the Satsuma, yeah, a failure for the people inside, but not a failure for the particularly for the car. So again, you could say that would be a failure as well. So yeah, let's see if we have anything else in the same kind of weight. We don't unfortunately have the weight of the Bitron, so I can't really guarantee that will be the same kind of weight as this. An Autobello is, yeah, substantially lighter, so that would be unfair. And a Sunburst, even though it's not the biggest of vehicles, is quite a weighty one. How much does the Fate 1 weigh? Ah, that's perfect. It's pretty much the same as we are. It's about 20 pounds lighter than we are, so yeah, it's only fair to go for one that's slightly lighter than we are after having one that's slightly heavier. So yeah, let's see what happens. Fate 1 is a little bit of a noisy bugger though. Surprisingly, the Fate 1 is more damaging to the Satsuma than the Covert is, despite the Fate weighing less. That's a surprise. Obviously the Fate 1 has suffered massively as well. The roof has curled upwards and the doors have popped out. But I'd be more comfortable in that than I would be the Satsuma, which has had the doors move not only out but also back. The chassis has bent just like the Fate 1 has, but the steering wheel and the column shifter have been moved back towards the driver. So yeah, whereas obviously the steering wheel hasn't moved back towards the driver with the Fate 1. So even though the Fate 1 looks hardly impressive, it's certainly better than the Satsuma is, which, yeah, looks pretty much as badly as it did with a 60 mile an hour small overlap crash test, to be honest. So yeah, failure on that one, unfortunately. So, but that's just the way it goes sometimes. So let's see what happens when we're up against a car that is substantially heavier, substantially larger, and yeah, also newer than we are. So yeah, what are we gonna pick? I'm feeling a Grand Marshal, to be honest. I don't think we've used one for a while. Let's try and find one that weighs twice as much. Pretty sure there is one out there. Yeah, we'll go for the long wheelbase V8 Sport version. Weighs twice the amount that we do, and is obviously far newer as well. So let's just... Grand Marshal has a relatively good drive line, to be honest. It's keeping mostly straight and narrow. Oh, death. The fact that we've pretty much stopped and the Grand Marshal is still continuing on says quite a lot, and it's actually pushed us back. The Grand Marshal has not suffered at all, really. Obviously the bodywork and some mechanical aspects have been damaged, but the bodywork itself has gotten away with that fine. By the bodywork itself, I mean obviously the interior compartments have been practically untouched, whereas the Satsuma, yeah, again, that's even worse than the 60-mile-an-hour impact with the Fate 1 and the small overlap crash test, to be honest. That is highly damaging, highly scary as well by how much damage it's had to take, but the Grand Marshal, you'd be fine. Perfectly fine, especially if you're wearing your seatbelt and you've got an airbag with it. So yeah, there we go. The Satsuma 210 there, not the most impressive of vehicles, but it is a nice mod in its own right. It's got a huge variety of versions of it as well. You've got pickup versions and station wagon versions as well, with a whole variety of engines, sizes and powers. But yeah, in terms of safety and general you know, toughness, it's not the best, but quite frankly, was you expecting anything else? Because I wasn't. Nonetheless, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.